So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Private Victories podcast. We are joined with a very special guest today, Arian. He is the CEO and founder of Avon Media, and I have the great pleasure of hosting you for a couple of days, actually. So, you want to tell them a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, absolute pleasure listening to this show in real life, by the way. It's like a real privilege. So talking about myself, so as you were saying, I'm the founder and CEO of my agency. I do coaching. I help entrepreneurs achieve time and financial abundance. I'm an award-winning public speaker, all that shebang. But really, I'm just like a nice person that loves to have a good time.
I think that's one of the things about the next, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, however long we have time for, is we're going to talk about some very unorthodox things because you do some very unorthodox things. I mean, one of the gifts that Arian actually brought me was, first of all, I always struggle to pronounce this, rapé.
Rapé.
So that's one modality. You brought me another one, which obviously I tried before. And Arian and I actually went into 2020 together.
Yeah. Oh, true. Yeah, we did.
We went into 2020 together because we were actually sitting in ceremony, in an ayahuasca ceremony going into 2020. I remember hearing in the background, I don't know if you remember, like all the fireworks and stuff like that. And I just thought, like, what an incredible way to go into the new year. But so we've had quite a few experiences together. But one thing that you brought me that I thought was very interesting was the nail bed. You want to tell me a little bit about what that's about?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So it would be the best to show, but like it's like fakirs, like when they stand on like proper nail beds, like proper nails. I found someone in Bali. His name is Superhuman. So the whole background story, real quick, is like he was driving a Ferrari, had a huge crash. All the doctors told him you'll never be healthy again. He showed me like X-ray pictures of his skull. Like everything was like completely broken, everything. And so he made his life mission to become a superhuman, to like find alternative ways to heal himself, alternative healing modalities, which is similar to how you and I live our ways. Like lives, we find unorthodox ways, as you were saying, in order to heal ourselves, in order to grow both as entrepreneurs, spiritually, whatever it is, right? And one of the modalities he introduced me to is the nail beds. And that's actually like proper like long nails that are like, how do you say this, like assembled with some pieces of wood.
We'll get Tristan to pop up some photos on screen, or just some B-roll.
Yeah, good. And they were hand carved in 5th generation from Bali. And it is one of the most powerful modalities that I found for myself in my life. And it's something that is so unorthodox that would bring so many positive benefits with it. But because it's just like weird to stand of a bed of nails and it's just like, it looks painful. Like, why would you do that to yourself? That's why people don't open up themselves to it. And I thought, like, you're the kind of person that is, taking its life to positive extremes. That's why I thought, I would bring you one.
And one of the main things I actually want to focus this podcast on is being a spiritual badass in the realm of business, because it's something that I think you're better at than anyone else. And it's something that I look to you definitely for guidance and as inspiration. Like, if any of you guys have the great pleasure of being in the same room with Arian, you can feel the energy from a mile away. And, honestly, hats off to you, because it's so hard in the realm of business. As I said, like, most of the time, like, I can be loud, gregarious, all this, but I'd say that's maybe 10% of the time, 90% of the time, I'm like stifled in my head, systems building, thinking about something, etc., etc. So was it kind of always like that for you from the beginning, in terms of really intertwining your spiritual side of things and the business side of things, or did something bring that on?
Absolutely not. Like zero. And for me, it was like, I had a very challenging childhood in which I saw a lot of like domestic abuse, alcohol abuse, like violence, all that stuff. My mom and I moved out together, and the next husbands were just like some weird ass people, And so for me, I had like a lot of like childhood trauma, but I always kind of like just, put it underneath the rug, be like, didn't really happen. And so it really was for me until I was like 21, or like I started my business with like 20 while I was at uni studying. So like when I was like turning 21, I was slowly realizing, okay, there's a lot of unhappiness that I carried from my personal life into my business life. That's something that I also learned through you. You always say like you don't have business problems, you always have personal problems, right? And that is something I was truly experiencing. I remember at one point with my agency, within 1 month, half of all our client retainers just like gone. Like half of all our clients, like imagine that, like 50% of your income just like
I've had that experience as well a couple of times, and it's
and that really like put me into this like situation where I had to do something differently. You know, like I was working more and more hours. I was working harder and harder and harder. I was making a bit more money, more revenue, not more profit though. And I was just realizing how I was getting more unhealthy, and I was feeling more and more unsatisfied and unfulfilled. So through that extreme experience, I was then led to go on this beautiful journey, which is like exploring my own spirituality. And certainly my biggest step towards that was in April 2019 when I went to my first ever ayahuasca ceremony. And that, of course, like changed my life in a tremendous way. You've talked about ayahuasca a little bit. And yeah, that kind of like kicked off everything. And after I went to that retreat, I realized that, you know, and it, as obvious as it sounds, but like life is about love. And we can say that, but there's so much depth to love. You know, when one person says love, like they don't mean anything by saying that, but another person says love and they understand the magnitude of what it means. All the layers are underneath like that word of love. And the first time I ever like experienced real love was at that retreat. Up until I was 22, I can wholeheartedly say I didn't love my parents. I couldn't feel love towards my, like either to my mom or my dad. I always thought like, okay, something's majorly wrong with me. So I always put that blame on me. I was cold, you know? And I remember when I was sitting in ceremony, Barry, the founder of One Heart, he was like sitting there and sending his love to his own mother. And I was just like witnessing it. Like nothing was happening. I could just like feel it for the first time. Like tear was like running down my cheek. And
is that something he vocalized or you just instinctively felt?
No, I felt, and I talked to him about it afterwards. And I was like, because he went into the ceremony with the intention of healing his mother. And I could feel that energy when there was a song playing and the lyrics were about the love of a son towards his mother. And he was like moving a little bit like a feather in the wind. And I was like just witnessing that and I felt it. Like and I cried. Like it was beautiful. And that was the first time I ever like felt true, deep love. And so to circle back to the whole like, have you always like unified both topics? That's when I realized, look, like life is meant to be lived in a full, prosperous, loving way. Like being a sick ass entrepreneur that doesn't have any like, you know, channel towards or, you know, ability to love and feel and be in gratitude. It's, I don't want to say worthless because it's very judgmental, but it's like, it's unfulfilling, you know? It's very unfulfilling. And that's what's being heavily promoted throughout like social media and everything. Like that competition with 20 years old, 24-year-olds getting nice cars, getting nice watches. And that's all beautiful. And, you know, like I sit here in designer clothing as well. I love that too.
Yeah, that jumper is so well suited for you.
Yeah.
Big
like,
heart with an A for Arian.
People always think it's like, yeah, it's funny. And so what I realized for myself is it is a dance, you know, to like unify both. And that's really when life starts to turn into this beautiful, magical journey in which you combine both your business aspects of things, where like you do all these like dope things, like buy the Richard Mille Rolex, everything. But then you also like, you smile and your heart smiles. And you know, like when you look in someone's eyes, they just shine. And that to me matters. So, yeah.
So one thing that I definitely struggle with is, you know, let's say you just come off the back of a, you know, a super long work day, right? And maybe you're seeing your mom later that day for coffee, or maybe you're seeing a nice lady later that day for a coffee or a drink or whatever. How do you, because surely, look, you know what it's like when you get in a deep focus mode, like that's it, you're in fucking beast mode. You're in a combination in this weird dance between beast mode and zen mode, right? And you got your, you know, you're locked in on your target. And you're doing that for extended periods of time throughout the day. Is there anything you do in terms of as a state change where you go from, you know, working through the day and then you know that you might do something social in the evening, or you might be with one of your friends, you want to be 100% present? Is there anything that you do that just kind of changes your state so that way you can be 100% present?
Yeah. So first off, I want to acknowledge the fact that I 100% struggle with that as well. Like I don't want to be like sitting here like, oh, I'm, you know, like enlightened being, like none of that. I also struggle with that, but I also figured out ways to go about that. So one book that really inspired me was High Performance Habits by Brendon Burchard. Like, I'm sure you've seen the billion YouTube ads. But I bought it, and it was really good because he talks about, I don't know how he called it, but let's just call them in-between periods. So like the time that you spend in between one activity. Oh, nice move. I saw that with the.
There we go.
Okay.
Should be good.
So like the in-between periods of like one activity to another. And by just letting go of everything that has been in that past activity and just focusing on the now, like on the present moment. And the best thing and the most underrated thing in the world, I believe, is your breath. Right? Like switching from that sympathetic to the parasympathetic nervous system, breathing through your nose to your belly. That's when your like whole body gets calm, you get centered, and you realize, oh, I'm here, and that's enough. That's a beautiful way. That's the easiest way, but it's also the hardest way at the same time. Like the truest truths are always the most simplest things, and breath is such a life-changing thing, though almost no one masters it or even understands the importance of mastering it. So breath would be the answer for me.
Yeah, to bring that into your field of consciousness is tough.
Yeah.
In the same way, like, it, as you said, it's easy enough to think about like, okay, just changing your breathing changes your physiology. Yep. In the same way, like thinking positive thoughts like changes your actual what you manifest. But then sometimes you don't realize, like, we've all been there in meditation where it's probably been like 37 seconds of like our brains thinking, and we don't even realize that our brain is in the same way we don't realize after 5-6 hours of work that we haven't really been breathing through our belly.
Yeah.
Or we might, be halfway through the day and go, oh, okay, you know what? Actually, I've been ruminating on negative thoughts for most of today. Yep. And, to bring that into your field of consciousness is extremely tough. It's a simple concept. Yeah. But as you said, it takes a lot of very dutiful practice.
Yeah. And for all of you watching right now, like take this moment to like breathe into your belly, saying.
And I want to go back to that concept of love. Because that's one thing that on my ayahuasca retreat, I had a very similar sort of experience. And you've been on 3 retreats now, correct? Yeah. So you've been on 3. I've only had the opportunity to go on 1, but I'm sure there'll be plenty more in the very, very near future. But I think you had it on one of your days, even when I was there, and I didn't experience it on the same day. I experienced it a couple days later. I remember you, after when you had the talking stick, you were like nearly in tears, talking about you finally were able to see through the lens and through the perspective of your mother.
Yep.
And like until that point, yes, you'd come in and out of it, but it's so hard to truly understand like that being a mom is the hardest job on earth.
Yeah.
And especially being a single mom. Your mom
or being our moms.
Like it's weird. Yeah. We have such crazy backgrounds. Yeah. Even just in terms of our moms and what they've been through. Like it's almost identical. And to this day, that's still even something I struggle with. Like it's so endearing to see my mom, retired, enjoying her life, has whatever she wants. I spoil her. I take her shopping. I buy her nice watches and jewelry and this and that. And like, I'm sure it's the same thing with your mom. Like, all she just wants is me to be 100% present. Yeah. And like the times that, put aside the expensive jewelry and the holidays and that's it. You're retired. Like you never have to work again a day in your life. Put that aside and everything financially. The happiest days is when I show up at her doorstep without telling her, with some fresh croissants from our favorite bakery, and I sit down and my phone is on airplane mode in the other room, and like she genuinely has my undivided attention. Yeah. And one thing that retreat definitely brought on for me is that like I don't do that enough. Like kind of as you said, and that hit a chord for me early on in this podcast. You're like, I thought I loved, but did I really? And that's something I really questioned after that retreat is like, I say I love my mom and I think I do, but how much actual love am I giving her? And like, is my definition of love a checkbox of like, you've done this for this person, you've done this for her, you've done this, you've spent X amount of time this week with her, blah, blah, that's checked off? Or is it a check mark, or is it an actual feeling? Have you filled up that person's, love bank? And I guess my question for you is, over the past few years, how's that changed?
That's a great question. So first off, I just want to point out, like, because I know a lot of your followers, what they admire about you is like how much money you make, how successful you are. Like, the things that are really dope about you are those things. That's what I find you dope for. Like, you have a very like strong character, and that's what most people don't see through social media. And that's where I believe a lot of people get to just change perspective a little bit and like seek for the right things that they find cool. I just want to point that out.
I appreciate that, brother.
Yeah, you're welcome.
There's just a little side tangent. Like, I always say, like, I don't really network with like online entrepreneurs, and this just because like off camera, like, just to be honest, like, as you said, there's a very big discrepancy between how much money you make and like what is your character and how do you show up. 100%. And I mean, you know better than anyone else, like a lot of like entrepreneurs, as I said, because they're so frenetic and it's just so like dense, the energy, when you meet them in person, it's like talking to a block of wood. Yeah.
And we talked about that. Like, also, like, I met a lot of my people that I really looked up to. I met them in real life. I became their business partners. They became investors. I lived with them. And it's always that kind of feeling of like, okay, like, cool, you're successful in business, but what more is there to your life? Like, what about your health? What about your partner? What about your love life? What about your spirituality and all that? And kind of like gets neglected oftentimes, which also why I believe that a holistic way of looking at it, building character, is so important. And that's what truly resonates with other people who have character. Like, you won't be out here impressing like a let's say like a monk or an enlightening person by all the money you have. Like, no one gives it. Like, or even with me, like, sometimes people like try to impress me by things. I'm like, I really don't give a shit about like that stuff. I've seen it. Like,
no, people see through it, and in the same way, like, I'm sure you have it all the time, where, as you said, like, someone will just put all their cards on the deck. They'll lay out all their cards and just be like, and talk about their accolades and like try to name drop and like talk about how much money they make in this, and it's just like,
Arian, can you introduce yourself? Yeah, I'm an award-winning public speaker.
No, I mean, you are, and I've seen, I don't think, a little side note, like that photo you have with like the fucking 1,000 people in the audience, like that's nuts. But at the end of the day, like, if you're someone, to be honest, if you're just someone who's a little more wise, you can see that for what it is, which is just a insecurity. And it's just an insecurity, and when you come into contact with someone like that, especially when so early on they're like trying to get your validation without, like, they're trying to get your validation, but they're not making it look like they want your validation. They're like, oh, I'm cool, blah, blah, this, that. You can just, immediately you just know that person, as I said, is insecure. And I mean, look, we all are at the end of the day. And I even know there's events that I've been to where, like, maybe I'm just feeling tired that day, or I'm just not feeling on the ball. And I'm just like, oh, by the way, like, this thing I did. You know what I mean? And it's like, am I doing it because I genuinely want to share this thing, or it's within context, or like, actually, that is, that is such a good leeway into, you taught me actually a huge lesson, a lesson indirectly at One Heart, which was, even at One Heart, because there was so many successful people there, and like, obviously the general thing that when they look at someone young like us, they're like, oh, okay, it's cute. Their parents probably paid for them to come here or whatever, you know what I mean? So like, and that was my first ever journey, and like, I didn't know anyone there, and like this and that. Like, I even felt myself in the first like 1 or 2 days, like trying to find a way to like finesse into the conversation, like this thing about the business, or like this, and then like you told me the biggest lesson, which is just like, well, after that first ceremony, I was like, all right, fuck all that. Like, because your ego just gets evaporated. So you're like, you have no sense of like, like your sense of not worth, but like your sense of, I don't know, your perceived sense of self. It just dissolves, and you realize like no one actually gives a fuck about anything. They just give a fuck about the energy that you're exuding. Yeah. But then you taught me a lesson, because it was like on my birthday or something like that. You like stood up and you just like, and you like told everyone about the stuff that I was doing in Nepal and like all this and that. And like, I don't know. That just taught me such a lesson, which is just like, first of all, let other people do the talking for you. Like, let other people, like, you don't ever need to toot your own horn. And if you do, like, no one cares and you just look like a bit of a loser.
I'm an award-winning public speaker.
and because that, I remember I felt that in my first 24 hours because, like, I'm trying to build rapport with all these successful business owners and, like, and pretty much everyone there was older. So yeah, little side note, that taught me a lesson, which is just like, look, like, it's hard sometimes, but you don't need to, you can just kind of be quiet and let people figure things out themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also a very dangerous trap. Like, we share the same coach for some while, and he shared with me a concept about pride and shame. And like, you take pride of your business. But what if that business one day is not performing very well anymore and your identity is that business? What is the opposite of pride? It's shame. And when you're in shame, instead of like, guilt is I did something wrong, whereas shame is there's something wrong with me. Like, you start questioning your whole self, your whole identity. And when your identity is always like tied to a business, and it will not happen, it's not what we're manifesting into our world, that the business, one day goes down. But like, what would happen if? Like, I've seen it with some business mentors that have sold their business for like millions of euro or dollars. And then they went into this like huge identity, like trap or black hole, whatever you want to call it, where they're like, but wait, so like, now that my business is not there anymore, like, who am I? Their new identity then became, okay, sold this business for X amount. That then was their new identity.
Yeah.
But like,
that's the new punchline.
But what else is there? Like, if you're not the CEO of, if you're not, like, award-winning public speaker and all that, like, who are you? And that was also a very big challenge for me. At like One Heart, you don't talk a lot about your business. You just don't. You just like vibe with people. You just hug people. And it was weird for me at first. I was like, I want to talk about how cool I am. People just don't give a shit.
No, yeah, like, so as I say, you've been on three journeys. Yeah. I think you probably, like, what I experienced the first one was probably what you experienced the first one, which is like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, especially when you're in a big group. There is always this thing like trying to almost establish this pecking order and trying to understand who fits where in the group. But when it's so the opposite of, like, you just don't really, like, it's just weird if you start talking about like business or even just like things you did, like, it's such a foreign, I don't know. And as you said, it's weird because you'll be literally like hugging this billionaire, but you just have like no idea. And like everyone's just wearing like tattery clothes. And
so talking about the clothes, I want to call you out. So here comes a funny story, right? So this guy shows up in the middle of Mexico, the jungle, with like a suitcase, right? And he goes up to the first event, like you have like some prep events and shit. And this guy pulls up his nice London shirt, like that, like watch this, that.
No,
like,
I didn't have a watch.
Not the watch, but everything else. Like
everything.
Shirt.
I know what you, nice linen shirts, some
Laura
Pianas.
You could have gone into like Rain nightclub, London, whatever, like sit at a dinner in the middle of Mexico jungle. And I was like, huh? So funny side fact, I did exactly the same thing on my first time I went there, and that's why, if you remember, I bought you clothing in Bali and I brought it to Mexico because I knew you would do exactly that, and I gifted it to you.
This is true. I would have been so unprepared for ceremony.
Yeah.
Because I literally wore your stuff every single time. Outside of that, it was just like,
and the Emirates pajamas, of course,
and
from first class.
Luckily, I didn't have to end up wearing them. I was like, oh, okay, these are just some throwaway stuff. I'll wear. Yeah. I'm very grateful you brought me those.
Yeah.
But look, let's go back because I think it's super, super important. Let's go back to that concept of love.
Yeah.
As we were talking about, like, what's changed now.
Yeah.
Where, we were talking 2 years ago, this perceived sense of, yes, you're trying your best to love someone compared to like actually embodying it.
Right. We also still have that open loop that you like start talking about, like, how did your relationship to your parents changed ever since that spiritual journey? So I want to like close that loop for the people listening that are like, why did they never answer that question? I'm very German, so I'm very rationally thinking sometimes. And like we talked about, but we didn't finish it, so now I'm finishing it. So how did that change? So through the work with psychedelics, so the way I would title or put a label on it, if you were meant to, is Tim, our shared friend, introduced this term into my life, an intentional psychonaut, like using psychedelics for an intentional use for self-growth, self-discovery, and to really go within to the seventh direction. And so how that changed is, ever since I started working more with psychedelics, whenever I went into these ceremonies, I was like, okay, Now ayahuasca, tell me what the next big business step is, like
Mm.
tell me how to make the big bucks.
Mm.
And I'm sitting there in ceremony, like crying, and ayahuasca just tell me, have a conversation with your mom about your childhood. I'm like, no, like you didn't get it. I want to have the business advice. And Aya's like, nope, talk to your mom. That's it. And then it closed down, like door shut, boom. So I talked to my mom and I had a conversation about my childhood and just like thanked her like for everything, like truly like, but like from a place of like genuine gratitude, whereas sometimes we say thank you, we don't mean it. Like the most genuine conversation. And do you know that like when you laugh with your parents, with your mom especially, and it's like that tummy laughter that you don't get with anyone else that you had as a kid? We had that kind of conversation like on Farsi, so I'm half Iranian, that's her mother language. And so that was just beautiful. And afterwards in business, so much clicked, so much just happened because we have so much like blocked energy around our personal life, about our love life, about the relationships we carry to the people we love, our parents. And we always just focus on the business things and we neglect like working on the actual things that matter, which is like having that tough conversation with your mom, your dad, whatever they've done to you, whatever happened in your childhood, whatever is happening, that is where the true growth takes place. And ever since I've been working more with psychedelics, I became more genuine and open to my parents, have more genuine conversations. And, sometimes they're not efficient, where you just call to have a laughter. And that's important.
And as you said, working with plant medicine, and honestly, at the end of the day, what plant medicine does and what can help mimic is what 10 years of devout meditation can do. It's just at the end of the day, you and I have lives, so you and I have lives and we can't dedicate 4 hours a day for 10 years to getting to a point where we can access these sort of insights. So ayahuasca is something of a little bit of a cheat code where you can access that, you can access a higher consciousness. You can take those lessons, then you can apply them to the day to day. I always say like meditation is kind of like this.
Yeah.
And then you do say something like ayahuasca or mushrooms, and definitely ayahuasca takes it to a different level.
Yeah.
And, I'd say it's actually the ceremonial aspect of it. Like, I honestly think that if you had that exact same One Heart Journey week, for example, or whatever, organization you go to, and it was, instead of ayahuasca, it was a high dose of mushrooms, I genuinely think you probably come out with 80% of the same sort of insights.
100%.
I think the main thing is that ceremonial aspect and all of the integration you do after this, that. But so meditation goes like this, and then you take something like a decent dose of mushrooms or ayahuasca, you come here, and then when you come down, you're at you get a bump in trajectory, and then you can keep going with your day-to-day spiritual practices.
Yeah.
I think that's so powerful, and those different sort of modalities, they show us the energetic blockages. And like, this is why, like, I think, the spiritual work, everything you do from a biohacking perspective, everything you do from a relationship perspective, like all this stuff outside of the business, to me is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Right? Because at the end of the day, you are your worst enemy. You are your worst enemy, and you can't see the places where you're tripping yourself up until you start to do work like this. And, we're not saying that everyone should go, on an ayahuasca retreat or work with, plant medicine or anything like that. Just at least figure out where your energetic blockages are, right? And at least start to, I've even shown you a couple places right here where, like, I've noticed things in myself and I go, why do I do that? Where, like, I might be with someone 40 or 50 years old and, like, maybe I am craving a little bit of their validation. You have to stop and ask yourself why. And how does that also show up in your business? Because that will show up in your business.
What love did your dad not give you that you're now seeking in a billionaire?
There we go.
And now that missed validation when you're having a discovery call, guess why you didn't get that sale? That's actually how it goes.
Yeah, no, but it will even show up in your discovery calls. I've even seen it before where people will, like, overextend or oversell or or just talk off a client's ear too much. And those are usually the same people who, as I said, go to a networking event and it's just like all me, all I accomplished this thing, blah, blah, et cetera. So this work is so important. It's so important in terms of longevity as well. Because I've seen so many entrepreneurs get burnt out. And I've seen so many entrepreneurs get to a point where they're just like, there's no point in this. And and they just get out the game entirely. And, you know, we were talking the other day, there's a lot of entrepreneurs who make a lot of money and then lose all of it. And then they lose they make a lot of money, and then they get jaded and have this feeling of despair because the only thing worse than being unhappy is having everything that you thought you wanted and still being unhappy.
Yep.
Because at least, and people don't get this, and I always say you have to go through a paradigm to understand it. And like, I thought I got it, even when I was like 14, 15, 16, I was like, yeah, no, I understand that like money doesn't make you happy. But I was like,
since you are until you are at the point where you experience it.
Exactly. Yeah. You can't understand until you actually experience it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's way worse because, at least when you're, unhappy, you're like, oh, I'm unhappy because X.
Yeah.
But when there's no X, when it's just literally like you're unhappy because you're fucking unhappy, then that is one of the scariest places on earth to be. And a lot of entrepreneurs, what happens is they'll scale it up. And I've even seen it, I've seen it with like quote unquote competitors of mine. I've seen it other people in my industry. Like I see it a lot. People scale up, they get really unhappy because it's not what they ever thought it was going to be. And then they find a way to self-sabotage. Or they dig themselves a grave even further. And they buy more and more and more excess and more look at me and more flash and this and that. And then, the scariest time as an entrepreneur is when you're winning the most, because that's when you're most likely to make the mistakes. And that's when you're most likely to lose that sense of humility and, think you're on top of the world and this and that. And then most of the time, just like Icarus, everything comes falling down. And then once they're down there, they've lost their sense of identity. They're like, oh no, but I'm the successful business person. And then it's just another climb back up to the top. Yeah. And usually it's a very cyclical thing.
Yeah, 100%. So what were for you, because you said it's so important to like find these blockages, release these blockages, what were the best modalities for yourself to discover these, for people listening that want to understand like how, like this all sounds cool, but like how?
Yeah, so I mean, look, at the end of the day, something like ayahuasca, I think is very, very hard.
Okay, let's not go like to the extreme. Like
so I think that's very, very hardcore. Right. And I understand. It's not for the average person listening to it. It's not something that I recommend and I don't even recommend mushrooms, LSD, ayahuasca. I don't recommend any of that stuff until you've been meditating for at least a year.
Interesting viewpoint.
I started meditating when I was 14, and when I was 14, I was doing, in the same way you have a workout routine, I had a meditation routine.
Right.
Like Mondays it would be Vipassana, Tuesdays it would be Kundalini, Wednesdays it would be affirmations. Like, I would have a set routine. So I've been meditating, I mean, especially back when I was like 14, 15, 16, like I was meditating 30 minutes, an hour a day. Like I was the kid in the bathroom at my school meditating. Everyone seems to find that story very amusing. But and that's why, I think, in my opinion, that's your homework before you're almost allowed to use something like that. Because even if you get, a lot of blessings through something like LSD, mushrooms, etc., you may not even know how to receive it
100%,
or how to process it.
Yeah.
Because you're still so stuck and stifled. So outside of that, the best things that I've actually found: sauna, steam room. Go in a sauna for 15 minutes, or depends how hot it is. I can be in there for 15, 20 minutes, but go in a sauna or a steam room for 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes. And
30 minutes sauna?
Yeah, I've been in 30 minutes before. No issues. And especially, like just as we were doing yesterday at my gym, doing cold plunge sauna, cold plunge steam room, because then that mental chatter goes away. And that's when you get the insights.
Good point, yeah.
Right? When I've gotten my my most interesting insights in saunas, in steam rooms, on while I'm taking plant medicine or while I'm sitting in meditative practice. So for the common person, that, as I said, isn't ready to expose themselves to something that is definitely quite intense, I'd say something like sauna, steam room. I'd say even if you can do a cold bath, like not a ridiculously cold bath, but something where you can stomach it for 5 to 10 minutes, it just shuts up that mental chatter in your mind and allows those things instinctively and intuitively to come to you. You know, I have so many people, and you know, even part of me was kind of concerned when I first went on that ayahuasca retreat. I was like, fuck, I really hope I don't come back like just a fucking weirdo. Like,
yeah,
like
you told me that was your biggest like fear.
Like I was like, I hope I don't come back, and I'm like, oh, okay, like I'm gonna drop everything and like go meditate under a rock for the next 10 years. Like, and you know, I've had people tell me that that's their concern. And what I realized, and I'm sure you can attest to this, is, you know, things like extreme cold, things like ayahuasca, things like that bring you back to that primal sense of self. I don't think they put you onto a new life path. I think they just show you what was there, but you couldn't see.
Yeah.
And sometimes that will then take you onto a different life path.
Yeah.
But who cares? Because that's what was meant to be. You just, you were never, in tune enough to actually see that.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, for something that's a little less intense, long 31 minute long 31 hour long meditation sessions, steam room sauna, I found those to be the best personally.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely interesting with the sauna steam room. One thing that I would also add is music. Music is huge and it's severely underestimated. Music. Like the extent to which music influences us is insane, right? It's all in our subliminal the whole time, all the words you listen to, right? Fuck bitches, get money, all that bang, which is nice. We like that. But also, and what about, you know, the other things? So music can also be a huge healing modality where I've shared my playlist with you, the Unconditional Love playlist, where if you listen to medicine music, for example, like lyrics that, you know, triggers some emotions within you, also, you know, like accelerate that feeling process rather than the thinking process, because it's what you all described as feeling. You're saying like, look, I'm going into extreme warm or cold conditions. That's when your body shuts down, like your thinking shuts down, and you go into your heart, you know? Like it's really about that feeling, and that's when you start recognizing the real things, because if it's your head, it's always ego. Whereas, you know, Carl Jung says like your head is your ego self, and then you have your real self, which is your soul, which is like what you feel. And so with music, it has been one of the most beautiful modalities in my life to really also go into the state of love, unconditional love, and feeling, seeing what is underneath the skin, underneath the ego that wants to be worked through, you know, because we always like oftentimes listen to like Drake this, Drake that, you know, and that's great. We all love Drake, like the GOAT, you know, but like, is this all to your music taste? Like, is this all to your palette of like, you know, things that you take away information and knowledge from that feeds your subconscious the whole time? So, you know, that's like one more thing that I find to be super powerful.
No, I agree. And, you know, the interesting thing and, you know, we both love a bit of rap music, bumping it this morning when we were in the gym. Yeah. You know, we love a bit of rap music, a bit of Brent Faiyaz, a bit of, you know, a whole catalog and a whole plethora of music. Yeah. But, you know, especially say something like that healing music. And, you know, everyone knows that I'm a big fan of like classical music, French classical music, stuff like that. You need to have a sort of a certain palette for it. And it's the way that I can describe that sort of music. Like sometimes, you know, once again, I love rap music, but rap music to me is almost like McDonald's in the sense that like, it doesn't matter whether you're on 9 hours of sleep or 2 hours of sleep. If you eat a Big Mac or some nuggets or whatever, you're going to taste it. Like it's very visceral. Whereas if you're on 9 hours of sleep, you know, and you're in a great mood and this and that, you might enjoy a nice salad that, you know, isn't the most intense flavors, but like you have the palate for that day. Yep. Whereas on 2 hours of sleep, you'll eat some salad and you'll just be like, it'll do nothing for you. Like it won't.
Well said.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And,
I get it, yeah.
And I think it's the same thing with music. You can be on 9 hours of sleep or 2 hours of sleep and you bump some rap and because it's so visceral and aggressive and it makes you feel something. Whereas, you know, you're on low sleep and you listen to those healing sounds, you're like, what the fuck are all these like chimes and bells and whistles? Whereas like, you know, if you're at that place where you can actually receive it, because it's very below the surface, you know? Whereas I said, a lot of this other music is totally surface level and it's very like about the lyrics and this and that. Whereas a lot of this other music is about how you actually feel.
Like a handpan. It's a vibration. It's a frequency, talk about, quantum physics and stuff, like we're frequencies. So this frequency stimulates us in a certain way, and it can be a frequency of fear, or it can be a frequency of love, That's why like it's very powerful to like open yourself up to some new type of music, like we're talking about like classical music, like Chopin, Mozart, Beethoven has like very calming effects. But then also like things like handpan music, where it's literally just like theta waves that, are being induced into your body, or like Peter Gabriel, like the proper musicians, like, that was music, where it's like about the power of the heart, songs like that, Heroes, like that's proper music. And that's why I feel like a lot of people get to open up themselves a little bit about it, because I remember my dad would always like tell me about that music. I was like, come on now, like what is that kind of music, old stuff, But that's what really changed a lot of my life, to be honest. So if any of you wants the unconditional playlist, just shoot me a DM on Instagram so I get more followers. Hi, my Instagram is here.
we'll pop it right over there.
Self-plugged.
But that was sly. It was nice. I have a question for you, because this is something I feel as a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with. And for a long time, I struggled with this until, and you'll see things on the table, for example, my watch books. I'm very big into my horology. I have, too many old school film cameras, medium format, 35 mil, obviously digital cameras like that. I'm basically teaching myself how to DJ very, very soon. Yeah. And I started, and as well as,
what's your DJ name?
I haven't decided yet. I'll let you guys know.
Okay.
But even just for example, this podcast for me, it was a way of, if you guys haven't noticed, I'm not a very good conversationalist. I and I and like I'm not very good at long form content. And I know you're gonna be nice and blah blah this that.
No, I'm a very honest person. Like if you're bad at something, I'll tell you that.
That's true. That's true. But
like me,
it's not where I want to be. Where I feel as though like I don't have that Joe Rogan-esque ability to speak with someone for.
Dude, you moved the microphone twice. That was
yeah. Like, and I think that's so respectable. People like Lewis Howes, Joe Rogan, this like they can talk to anyone for 2-3 hours and keep up. Whereas with me, like, not really at the moment. And even that's why, for example, I wanted to do this podcast, because I felt as though it pushed myself out of my comfort zone. Anyways, the reason I'm saying all of this is because with watches, like it brings me back to like that kid state with like, with my old school film cameras, it brings me back to that kid state. Even just like, in the park, every Sunday I'm in the park and I take my shoes off, I go for a run and then take my shoes off and I earth and I take my shirt off and I just sit there and I smile and blah, blah. And to me, all this is, another example is tennis. Like I love playing tennis, and always growing up, I wanted to learn how to play tennis. Once I started making some money, I finally got myself a tennis instructor. To me, this is all ways of me playing, which actually gives me energy. And I feel as though a lot of entrepreneurs really struggle with finding, and it was, it only became this in the past 1.5 to 2 years, where I picked up all these hobbies and I realized hobbies outside of your business are so important, where you play and it gives you energy. Before I was thinking like, I don't like, of course I've always had hobbies, but for me it's like, okay, business, then a hobby for me is training and gym. It's like, okay, cool, but like that's still you're accomplishing something. Or like meditation and like spirituality is a hobby, but it was more like, but I'm doing that to accomplish something.
Focus,
blah, blah. Yeah, exactly, to accomplish focus. Whereas like now I have these hobbies where there is no point to them. And those are the ones that I have found have given me the most value in my life, because it's my way of playing and just restoring energy. And then I can then take that onto my business and, my conquests and this and that. My question is like, what are your sort of stuff? Like, how do you play?
That's a beautiful question. As I said, I love music. So, and it's so great that you're saying that, because like as entrepreneurs, we always like want to put the play to the point in time where we made it. Then I'll do the playing part, right? But that childlike curiosity always wants to be let out, right? And if we suppress that inner child, it will just make us unhappy. That's an energetic blockage. If we don't like play around, like Tristan knows, like when I'm with your shooting, like I'm making these stupid jokes all the time, because that's just like who I am. Like I like to let it out. I like to like be goofy, like when someone records a story, like I don't want to suppress that. That's me. That's my persona. When it comes to hobbies, so I had a piano, so I love playing piano. got that into my apartment in Berlin. So like now I'm playing piano in between my work blocks. So 15-minute work, 10-minute piano play. So that is something that I truly enjoy. Music is something I truly enjoy. For me, probably like spirituality is a hobby where I see it as like inner child play, because I not only do it as accomplishment where like I go there and succeed at a retreat, but I also like I facilitate myself. So with friends, like for example, I brought you some gifts, and tomorrow evening we're spending a time and I'll like guide you through some things, and that's also a way of like me playing, like me introducing a friend to those modalities where I don't necessarily need to like take part in it myself. So that will definitely be something as well. And then sports, like I love playing basketball with Kinam, like my best friend, things like that. So I'm sure there's more, but nothing coming to my head right now. Like just different things that are like pointless, as you were saying. It brings this like richness and creativity to your life that then gets into your business.
So switching gears real quick, because I know once again this is something that'll be very applicable to my audience, is dude, you're 24, making multi 5 figures a month, doing very well for yourself, and multiple businesses, very successful agency, revered by people. But I know you still got that thing of like, motherfucker, why am I not doing at least 100K a month? Why am I not doing $500,000 a month? Yeah. And do you have, and maybe you don't have any advice because you're still going through it, but how have you managed to, because we had a conversation about this the other day and it seems like you have managed it very well. How have you managed to not let that idea and that, really just that egoic chat get in the way of your day to day?
Yeah. So like in full transparency, we talked about this yesterday, but I'll repeat it for the podcast, right? When I first worked with you, met you in person. So we went to a 2-day workshop 2 years ago, paid like £17,000 for that. And so I roll up to London, I'm the hot kid, like smart, everything, successful, young, good looking, this, that. And then we go into like Iman's coaching and he's like, yeah, so tell me what you do with your business. I'm like, yeah, this, and that. And he goes like, this, and that is shit. I'm like, what? Wait, what? I thought it was great. I thought it was a go. And then I got to realize, look, there's someone that's like younger and further in business, but I was always that young, successful kid. But now I was like, oh, there's someone like younger than me and more successful in terms of like financials and everything. And that's when you triggered like something in me, obviously, right? I was like playing that compare game for like 3-6 months afterwards, where I would literally like just be a copy of you, like try to like do everything the same way, and just make me like super unhappy and super unfulfilled. And it was just like stupid because it totally like took away from like who I am and from my beauty and my individuality, which is what makes me cool. Like it's the fact that, I might make multiple 5 figures a month and not be at 6 and 7 figures yet, but I have my spirituality and I have my happiness. And that's, that's me. So yeah, maybe someone is like further right now, but you never know. Like maybe their path is a linear growth, whereas mine is an exponential. You never know. So that could be also a thing. But what's important is to, and what I took out of all of this is to like never forget about your own beauty or individuality, like what makes you you, because no one else has that. The moment you start becoming a copy of someone else is the moment you start like losing your self-identity, your sense of self, your happiness, joy, everything, right? And now coming to that second point of like, okay, like why aren't you impatient? Because yeah, there's a huge dissonance sometimes with me, because I know of how smart I am, how intelligent I am, my network, my connections, everything, but then I'm making multiple 5 figures. Like last month, for example, I made like 69K with everything combined. It's like, yeah, but why am I not making like 500K a month? Like I'm so smart and everything. So really what I'm taking from this, because I had a beautiful conversation with a shared friend of ours, Leonard, yesterday at dinner, and he said, look, Arian, like, so he bought himself a Ferrari. He's like, I'm like congratulating him. He's like, Arian, you know how old I am, right? I'm like, yeah. He's like, say it. I'm like, 30. He's like, yeah, 30. Like I've been collecting that compound until now. I've been driving for 4 years with a blue BMW with a cream interior, and like that's also a nice car.
Yeah,
it's not the Ferrari though. It's like, look, like I've been waiting for this whole time, but like now I have that car and it's cool. Like And he reminded me like, Arian, like what makes you sick is the fact that, and this is what's individual about me, like I jumped on planes. Like I flew to my business mentor with the last money I had. I flew to New York to Gerard Adams. And I was like, I want to just work for you for free for 3 months, you know? And I did it. I just flew there. I flew to London for the very first time, started business and failed. Like I went to Mexico, Costa Rica, and I had no friend that introduced me to it. I went alone. I didn't know what ayahuasca even was. I just did it. I went to Bali, you know, like now I'm here, like I do things on my own, and that's what makes me me. And the moment I try to be someone else, the moment I try to like be efficient with everything in my life and build systems for everything, I become you. And then I'm whack. And I had to learn that, you know? So we talked about this, like the cringiest question is like, how can I be like you? You know, like sometimes followers ask like, how can I be like you? You can be like me by being you. That's how you become me, because what you like about me is not all the things I do. It's the fact that I'm staying authentic to myself. And that's what you actually like, but you don't realize because you think it's the things I've done, you know? So yeah. And so I worked through that. Now I can say that.
So powerful.
Yeah.
That's so powerful.
Yeah. So thank you for triggering that. And, you know, it's also really about like dropping that ego, you know, like you're 20, like he's 4 years younger than me. Still, I've paid you another like good chunk of money to like also learn from you again. You know, it doesn't matter if someone's like younger, like whatever, like it's not about competition in life. It really isn't. I thought it was, but it really isn't. It's about co-creation. It's about having fun. It's about elevating each other, you know, bringing the best out of each other. There are things that I'm learning from you. There are things that I can teach you, and together we win that way. You know, that's what's more important than like, oh, he's better than me. That's not what matters, you know?
Yeah. 2 + 2 = 5. You know, us together is a lot more powerful.
Quick math.
Quick maths. but man, that's so powerful. But one thing that I do, or one question that I have for you is, how do you then relate that back to the person that's, you know, trying to sign their first client or get their first sale online or whatever, you know, because I guess for you at this point now, it's easy for you to embrace your individuality because you've worked so hard to nurture all of these incredible qualities about yourself. What would you say for the person that's like, okay, that's cool, but like I literally am making zero, like how?
Yeah, 100%. And this is where it gets so difficult. I talked about this with Leonard as well yesterday, exact same topic, because with our generation, we have the extra added layer of pressure of social media. Like we can't just like sit in silence and fail. We have to be successful. And on top of that, we have to post it on Instagram. And on top of that, we have to inspire others. We can't only just like do our thing. Now we also have like this whole pressure, you know? So to add on to that, it is tough. It is difficult. It's like for someone like starting out, it's like that like mentality of like, hey, you have nothing to lose. Like what is the worst case that can happen? So yesterday I was talking to Leonard and he was like, Arian, like you should move to London. I was like, I actually should, but there was like some limiting belief in me, you know, like the limiting beliefs stay the same, it's just like different levels to it, you know, like now for me, it's not signing a client for like 5-10K a month retainer. Now to me, the limiting belief becomes, okay, can I move from Berlin to London with my current amount of income, you know? And so what he was saying is like, Arian, like what's the worst thing that can happen? And he goes, worst case, excuse my language, you'll get more pussy, you'll get more money. It's like, that's a worst case. Like if you come to London, that's a worst case. Right?
I can vouch for that.
and I mean, I mean, like proper worst case, okay, would be you move there, it fails, you move back home to your parents. So what? Like, okay, worst case, you don't have parents, you'll crash on the couch of a friend. Okay, worst case, you don't have friends, you'll crash underneath the bridge. But even if you're alive, you're fucking alive. Like, that's great. Like, focus on your breath and you have that. Like, I think we forget about all the things we have, you know? Like, even for someone that's like signing a 300 euro a month retainer, like, there was a point in time where you doubted that you will ever achieve those 300 euro a month retainer. So there will always be like a version that was not as far as you. Think back to that point in time and be proud of yourself. Be grateful for all the things you've gone through and you're still at it. Like you might have failed through 10 sales calls. You're still there. You're still not giving up. And even if you are, I mean, you're listening to this, like you must care about yourself somehow. And then it's really about patience. And patience is the one thing that I think is also, like I'm talking about a lot of undervalued things like breath, but patience is another one. Like patience with our young generation, like just become patient, like get rid of that dopamine for a little bit. You've done dopamine detoxes, you know, You talk about delayed gratification a lot, private victories a lot. Those are things that I learned from you especially that are so important. And that's what made you so successful, because you were in that bathroom meditating. No one gave a shit about you. Like, you were that weird kid. But well, guess what? Like, that accumulated and that made you who you are, and that gave you your success. So be that weird kid, you know? And that is your thing. Like, you're that weird kid that tries to sell people for a 300 euro retainer. But that's dope. That's your story. Because then one day you will sell someone.
And I think it makes it so much harder in these days, because it's, you know, first of all, as you said, with social media, I mean, dude, the craziest thing is, like, let's say, I don't know, I mean, you know, 100 years ago, we'd have top hats and, you know, we'd be like, it'd be a totally different one. But imagine you and I, you know, in a different life. This is 100 years ago. This is 1920. And we are both young, successful business owners. You and I genuinely would have thought that we potentially were some of the richest men on earth, because we wouldn't have had context.
Yeah.
And the issue is, these days, social media gives you context, and it's this big blaring thing of like, okay, but there's this other person who accomplished it. But then the other issue that comes about it is, this other person says they accomplished it, but let's be honest, half the time they may actually not, or they're finessing this lifestyle that they don't actually live, or are, you know, promoting these accomplishments that unfortunately a lot of times they haven't even accomplished. And, you know, so now you're comparing yourself against something that may not even be real. But even if it is real, it's still so detrimental to you.
Yeah. Like, I'm telling you, like, you know this for a fact too. Like, we meet a lot of people and we meet them behind the scenes, and we have the behind the scenes conversations. So much of it is fake. Like, so much. Like, even with us, like, some things I'm sure, like, for example, good example, I want to be like fully transparent. Like, these Gucci joggers are not real. Like, and then your whole like image of me now just got boom. Like, you know, like, what? Like, I thought it was like real Gucci joggers. Like, and that's like what social media does to you. You don't know where it is. Like, this was a gift from my mom. I just value it because my mom cared about it to gift it to me. So I wear it and I like it. It looks nice. You know, it goes with my Ami Paris. Okay, that's real. You know, So what I'm saying is, like, there's so much like unreal things out there. And by us taking it all for 100%, we just like put ourselves into a situation of like constant unhappiness. Yeah.
Man, honestly, I could go on for hours and hours, but I got a call in 3 minutes for the agency. So my last question that I want to leave you with is, what is your private victory? The thing that you do in private no one else sees, that you think makes you stand apart or really puts you in that top tier performance?
There are many.
You can give me a couple.
Okay. Fun one. Not masturbating. That's a big one. Sexual energy transmutation is so big. That's like, whenever I don't do it, I'm very happy. And that's something that became more consistent in my life. So I'm super happy about that. Just like unorthodox thing again.
I would say unorthodox, but like
it becomes more and more mainstream as well.
You know, I think if you fall, you know, if you read anything on Taoism, like you know, it's people have been talking about this thing for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, sexual transmutation. So you know, it's funny because these days it's like, oh, you're talking about your private parts, but it's like, no, it's actually very, very important to not let your life force out.
100%. If you like, one of the most like loved books, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, right? Like, what people don't get, like, one of the biggest parts of the book he talks about, I think it's chapter 4, is sexual energy transmutation. But no one talks about that with that book. Everyone talks about all the other things, but not about that part. I'm like, so I started looking up online. I was like, well, what about that part? That's what actually interests me. And that's when, you know, I did a 3-month celibacy, no sex, no porn, no, literally nothing. My life changed around. I realized, like, wow, every man in their young 20s should do that. It will change your life. So that's definitely one private victory. But then there's so many, right? Like, just drinking enough water. Like, this is the biggest. Being true with yourself. You say you do something, you do it. Because no one else from the outside can tell if you told yourself to do that or not. Like, if I'm like in bed evening, it's 10:30 and I'm watching YouTube videos, I become conscious. I realize, oh, this is not healthy for me. I say, okay, I'll watch until 10:35, and it's 10:35. I see it. I put my phone away. That's the biggest private victory, when you're just honest to yourself. Because no one else knows. No one else knows. You know, this is what really that builds. We talked about character. That builds character. You say you'll do something, you do it. You're just honest to yourself. And when you realize, hey, that was a wrong or like I don't stand behind that belief anymore. It doesn't serve me anymore. Have the strength to say, hey, I did a mistake. It's not truthful anymore for me, so I'll refrain from doing that. And that's also powerful, because a lot of people think when they make a promise, they have to like stick with it for the rest of their lives. You'll become very sad, my friend, if you do that way, you know. So yeah.
Well, dude, this has been amazing. Ladies and gents, if you can go ahead and drop in the comments if you want Arian to be on for another podcast. We can definitely do a longer extended one when I have a bit more time. I mean, it'd be easy enough now that you're moving to London.
Facts.
But yeah, hope you guys really enjoyed. I appreciate you coming on, and yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Greetings to Igor, our friend.
I'll have my hair back soon enough. Give it another 4 weeks. I'll look normal again.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me, brother.